Okay. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me on season 2 of my podcast. Our focus is on the idea of starting things and why people start things, why they don't. So before we get into the questions, I wanted you to tell my listeners who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be with you. I'm Adrian Saville. I'm the founder and chief executive of Cannon Asset Managers, an investment firm. I'm a professor at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, where I work in the fields of economics, finance, and strategy. And I guess that already gives you some clues about self-definition. I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids, 17 and 13. I'm also a stepdad, and I'm a husband. I'm married to Kashmir Ismail, who's the CEO of the Youth Employment Service, and in her miracle magic has created 36,400, she will correct me, jobs for youth in South Africa in the past 18 months.
Wow, that's amazing. Sounds like she needs to be on my podcast next.
Maybe that was the intro.
Yeah, nice. I find I've been with my partner for 15 years, and I also find it very hard to introduce myself without her impact on my life. So I
Absolutely.
understand the intro. Yeah, cool. So we're here today to talk mostly about the idea of starting things, and you and I were on a webinar separately, and you mentioned in passing that your current asset management business actually started as a side hustle, which piqued my interest. So I'm interested for you to kick us off by just telling me the short version of that story, like how it started, why it started, and what it is today.
Short version, I've always been
Or any version, it doesn't have to be
fascinated.
short.
I've always been fascinated, intrigued by markets, by the economy. We can delve into my deepest past, my childhood, to try and work out where that comes from. But I grew up in what I would call a business family. And as early as 13, I remember sitting and listening to the radio. Yeah, there was such a time when at the end of each day, a radio announcer told us where the stock prices closed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the gold price,
What
bonds.
a time.
Yeah, I mean, this is edge of your seat stuff. And I would build fictitious portfolios. And that's where my that's where I can date my investment interest back to. And that interest has just never gone away. Here we are 40 years later, and I'm as fascinated by capital markets, allocation, economies, what causes these things to move. They are complex machines. And in part, I think that feeds the fascination and the intrigue and the challenge. But that fictitious paper portfolio eventually turned into an economics degree. And that economics degree as an undergraduate degree turned into a master's in economics, and then an honors in economics, and then a master's in economics, and eventually a doctorate in economics. And as I was doing my doctorate in economics, I had a growing anxiety, suspicion that I was turning myself into very well qualified but unemployable. And so a friend of mine said to me, "Well, you've built a set of skills, and you've got an interest that I think you could turn into a useful a tool for us." And us was my friends in their 20s who were getting into first promotions, the second step in their careers, and for the first time in their lives, they actually had some investable asset. And out of that, we built an investment club. And the idea of the investment club was we would meet once a month. We would talk about markets, economies, ideas, and from that build an investment pool and hopefully make some money. and that hopefully make some money was a pretty good start. And in the early years of that club, we packed down some nice returns. I don't want to sort of overclaim ownership of those results. It was a club, it was a pool. I was in charge of the club and the pool, and very quickly, others got to hear about it. And this, in part, was our side hustle conversation the other day. Is without any real intention or attempt, people were coming along saying, "Oh, we've heard about this club that you've got going. Could we join?" And believe it or not, within the space of 2 years, this club, which started off as 12 friends, had grown to 200 people who had become membership of this pool. And obviously, when you've got something that is 200 in this type of arrangement, it's no longer a club. And so I was obliged to license the business through the FSCA, or what was then the FSB. And the investment firm was born.
It's incredible to hear the way that you said that you were obligated at 200 people to just register. Now it was a thing.
Well,
that's great.
Well, I mean, look, that was a whole different story, because going from an informal arrangement where you've got people who are, I really want in, I'd love to be part of this, informal with modest obligations and expectations. Shifting it to a licensed firm is an entirely different proposition. Suddenly it's real.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so you say that you came from a business family. I really like that phrase. I don't think enough people classify their businesses as their families as business families. I think artsy families, but there isn't like a business family. I'm assuming that when you were younger, the people in your life pushed you because they were business people, and I'm assuming entrepreneurs, they kind of let you be what you were, and they had high risk appetites. Is that the case?
Look, I wouldn't say that I was pushed. I was encouraged, and the entrepreneurial attribute. I don't think that I wouldn't lay that expectation at my sort of parents' or family's feet. In fact, the prime mover in this business family initially is my dad. And, when I describe this as a business family, what I'm referencing is he would spend a lot of his time out of the city on business travels, domestically and then increasingly internationally. I was fascinated by what he was doing, trying to build a business. At the time, it was a JSE listed company, and grew to the largest motor retailer in the Southern Hemisphere under his leadership. So, if your dad is building something like that, it's very hard to ignore it, or for it not to have influence. In the same breath, at the same time, my mom was building a business, and Nick, I mean, I don't want to overcook this sort of side hustle thing, but her business actually started as a side hustle, and it was what's the word that I need? What's the descriptor that I need? It was like an event equipment renting business. So if you were going to have a wedding or a birthday party, you would hire the cutlery, the crockery, the table settings, the glasses. And it started initially as she did it for a couple of friends. And by the time she was finished, this was a big business running out of our garage at home, which she eventually sold. So this is the stuff that was going on. And what both of them showed me was that what you dream is possible. My dad came from very, very modest family background or beginnings. His dad worked for what was the South African Harbours as a crane driver. He was the first person in his family to go to university. He paid his way through university by working days and studying nights. My mom finished school, and that was the end of her study career. So, I'm not trying to sort of suggest I didn't have advantages and privileges. I did. I was born into white South Africa, but it wasn't a case of, here you go, son, take over the family balance sheet, keep growing the empire. It wasn't so much that I was encouraged to be an entrepreneur. It was, you've been given the opportunity, you've been given the infrastructure or architecture, it's up to you now. If you stuff it up, you're on your own. We'll back you, we'll support you, but this is yours. Long answer. Short answer is, I think my dad wanted me to be a chartered accountant. Horrific.
Like a good Greek father too. My dad wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, or anything other than an entrepreneur. Anything.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, exactly. And I do think that there's this like familial obligation that a lot of South Africans kind of relate to. A lot of people around the world probably relate to. There's movies made about that like obligation that we feel. And I think the thing that I'm always interested in is not just the idea of a side hustle and starting that. I'm interested in everything that people start, because a lot of people just carry on along the middle road, along mediocrity, and do what the world tells them to do. It's a very different kind of person who goes, hold on, I'm going to start this thing to the left or to the right. So the question I want to ask you is, can you remember the very first difficult thing that you wanted to start, that you set your mind to? And what was that, and what was it like?
I think, not to try and reach too far back, but when I was at university, I needed to find a way to finance myself and my lifestyle. I had a monthly allowance from my parents, and it was enough to get to and from university, and so I could get by. But if I wanted to do anything beyond the ordinary or the average, I needed to find a way to fund it, or to fund that ambition. And so I started a mobile disco, and that was my source of funds through. Yeah, that was my source of funds through university. And again, I think it makes the point that you were pointing to in our conversation last week, and it's about, if you love it, there's a good chance it might work. And for as far back as I can remember, I have loved capital markets, economics, investing, and I have shared an equal love for music, any music. And that sort of ear and affinity led me to go and buy this mobile disco. So I borrowed the money from my dad at interest. It was Prime Plus.
Great.
He's a chartered accountant. It was Prime Plus.
Yeah.
And so I funded the launch of this mobile disco, and boy, that was hard. Hey? Because as much as he was a business person, he wasn't an entrepreneur. He hadn't started something up from ground zero. And I'm describing my family circumstance, but I didn't have sort of aunts and uncles that were, my go-to people. I didn't have someone who I could go to and say, well, how do I do this? And so, look, we're rewinding a hell of a long way in time, but I got some photocopies made of a little flyer, a little pamphlet. I went to the shopping mall. I put it under windscreen wipers. Security kicked me out of the shopping mall. I wasn't allowed to do that. So I then sort of handed out the flyers, placed little strip ads in the local knock and drop newspaper. That was it was a learning by doing, and a hell of a lot of the stuff that I did, I got disastrously wrong. Starting with the naming of my mobile disco, which was just a bad name. I needed marketing help.
Come on, tell
my
us.
market position was bad. My advertising was bad. Yeah, everything was learning by doing. It was called the Blue Rumor Mobile Disco. No idea where that came from.
Amazing.
But it didn't go on to become Amazon.
No, I mean the Blue Rumor. That's great. It could have been a little Amsterdam side office, one of those rooms. But Adrian, the thing that I'm interested in, the premise for this entire season of the podcast is why? Why did you start something? Because I'm sure that your peers weren't. I'm sure that you did. Not everyone you knew was just like, you know what, I need money. Fuck it, let me start something. They just kind of suffered through it or got a job. What do you think it was that made you go, I'm ready to start a business to fund my life and continue on doing this forever?
A desire to craft something, and I think that there's a risk here that you parade as thinking that you've got something special or precious. I don't think that what I've got is particularly special or precious, but I do want to contribute through crafting and shaping. So here's something I love. I can give expression to it, music. I can give expression to it by playing 21st birthday parties, end of year office parties, weddings. I can do this till 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Imagine this. Imagine being paid to do something that you absolutely love. This isn't work. I mean, this is like, wow, the universe has shone a light on me. And the exact same thing with investing and my professorship is when I say, I'm heading off to the business school, I don't really mean I'm going to work. What I mean is I'm going to spend a day doing something I absolutely love, and I'm going to be paid for that privilege. The same with looking after the investment business. It doesn't mean it's easy. There are some parts of it that are exceptionally hard and some real challenges. And of the different things that I have built, without question, building Canon Asset Managers has been the hardest component. It remains difficult. And it is a labor of passion and love. But to go back to your question of, sort of why, it's this cocktail or a collaboration of, I love this. I think I'm reasonably good at it. I can make a contribution. I can give back by crafting or creating through this skill. And in doing all of this, I'm employable. It's a cool result.
Yeah, that is a great result. It does make me think of that. One of my favorite concepts in the world is the Japanese idea of Ikigai and your reason for being. I'm not sure if you've come across it, but the basic, there's 4 Venn diagrams of overlapping things that you need to discover your reason for being. But the question, I think, is, do you believe that you've found your reason for being and that is a thing? Or do you think that we kind of all just bumble along and do the thing that we're good at?
Tragically, I think a lot of people aren't doing things that they're good at. They're doing things that they've sort of found themselves in, and they are stuck or trapped. That's a big statement to make in the current environment where, if certainly in the South African setting, if you've got a job, hang on to it. So, I don't want my observation to be misconstrued or misinterpreted as being insensitive or oblivious to the environment. I'm acutely aware of the environment and circumstances. There's no one I know who hasn't been impacted in this environment. that said, we can change and we can shift. Your story about building side hustles says, well, even if this is my circumstance, I can do stuff on the side that gives expression to and that allows me to be my true self. I'm going to add to your reference. Sorry, I've forgotten the term that you used.
Ikigai.
The Japanese term, Ikigai. I love it. I'm going to make a similar but different reference. Sir Ken Robinson talks about being in your element. And if you are in your element, this will turn into something brilliant. So what is your element?
I love that.
Rudolf Nureyev has an element. Picasso has an element. The home-crafted ice cream maker has an element. What is your element? And I would put that alongside your Ikigai reference, as I think we all have something inside of us that is our true, real self. And if we can show that, it's beautiful. I mean, the world, I felt like Trump when I said it's beautiful. Can we blank that? But
I'm going to keep that all in.
There is inside of every one of us, there is this magician artist that has some extraordinary skill and capability. And if we can give expression to that, that is those things. I think that's where extraordinary comes from.
Yeah, I couldn't.
And those people when you see that.
Yeah, you do, and that's why I like the statement of in your element, because what I like about that is it doesn't refer to passion or love. And I think that we've twisted those things, right? That, you must be passionate about this thing. No, you can be in your element and unhappy. Or you can be in your element and be struggling, but you're still in your element because the thing that you're building is still bringing you joy. And it's actually what I was going to say to you about Canon. You said that it remains difficult. And my immediate thought was, someone like you, it remaining difficult is the reason you haven't left it yet.
Yeah, the word yet is quite tricky there.
Well, I mean, like it's an ongoing concern for you, right? Because the issue is
yes, absolutely.
People who are ambitious and intelligent, you get bored really quickly. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. So it's difficult. So you stick with it, and it keeps you on your toes.
And there's purpose. So I think the one thing that I would add to this is I don't like this word passion. Everyone is passionate about something. To me, there just feels like there is an absence of authenticity. Whereas, if you are in your element or if you have purpose, there's an authenticity. And that authenticity can't be masked or bullshitted. It's either there or it isn't. You can't make it up. Like you can't pretend that you love someone. You either do or you don't. And the same thing with this element and this purpose is you either believe it or you don't. It either gets you to sit up and think, at 3 a.m. about how can I make this thing better? What am I missing? I've hit a wall. How do I get around this, over it, under it? That to me is the driver of sort of purpose and element, and it keeps you committed in these very, very dark hours. And some hours are dark. If I think back over the 20-odd years that the business has been going, are there times when I've wanted to give up? Absolutely. Are there times when it would have been easier to give up than to keep going? Yeah. You find the paycheck, and off you go. But that comes at a very, very high cost, and that the cost is the reward that is nowhere on your end of month paycheck. And I'm building something. I'm contributing. I'm contributing to clients. I'm contributing to my colleagues, my employees. I'm creating lives and livelihoods. I'm contributing to the fiscus. And that is not about money. None of it is about money.
Yeah, 100%. But I think I'm going to ask a question that my listeners would want to comment on is it's easy to say that when you have a successful business that makes money. When you start something, it is about money. It's hard, especially in the current climates, to not think about money. And I personally agree with you that life is too short to build shitty businesses that just get money. I've had those opportunities, as have you. But surely at some point it is about money. Like what you do is literally in the
Sure.
middle of money, right?
Yeah. It is in the middle of money. We need to make an important distinction between, I manage money or wealth for people. That doesn't mean that I do this for money.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a very important distinction. Of course, you could be in it just for money. It's a very obvious place to come, or industry to come, if you want to be surrounded by money and assets. The point about, at some point it does have to wash its face. Absolutely. Otherwise it's a hobby. And initially, this business didn't wash its face. It took me a long time to get it through the J curve or the valley of death. The first time I got a paycheck from the business was after 3 years. And the way that I funded that was, the comment that I made to you in the run-up to this discussion was, this business was my side hustle initially. So I had a professorship in economics, and with the permission of my dean at the time, I said to him, I want to start this business. Am I allowed to do this? Absolutely, you can do it. How much time is it going to take? And initially it was, I think a couple of hours a week. By the time it became fully fledged, it wasn't a couple of hours a week. It was many hours per day. I was doing everything in the business, from filling out forms, building the website, loading clients, managing portfolios. And so it meant my average day was 16, 18 hours. And work day was my professorship, and business day would then kick off in between. Sure, professorship probably has more, or an academic career probably has more flexibility than most. So I had that flexibility or agility in my working life, but it still meant I had to look after 2 full-time jobs. And the first paycheck only came in year 3, after year 3, not at the beginning of year 3. So it was long. Hey? And that's a comment that I would throw in also is, just because you love it and you think it's a great idea, it doesn't turn it into a business. You need to make sure you've got a business before you leap from any certain circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dig a bit deeper into this side hustle story, right? So now you've working a full-time professorship job, you've got a full-time company running 3 years deep, and you're at breaking point. At which point did you decide that the asset management was now going to be your full-time gig?
You might think this is scripted because I know your story. My story was I landed up in the intensive care unit of a local hospital, diagnosed type 1 diabetic, with off the radar stress levels. Something had to give.
Wow.
And what gave was my health. And it was very clear to me that, this was no longer, I can do everything. It's, I've got to choose something. And the something was, I need to put the single asset that you can't buy and is very hard to recover right at the top of the balance sheet. And that's my physical and emotional and psychological health, which had all gone out the window. Furiously chasing both things to try and make them extraordinary successes at the same time. There's no cure for an A-type personality.
Yeah. And how old were you at this point?
But I was 30, hey? I was 30.
Wow.
Massive wake-up call. And if it wasn't type 1 diabetes, it would have probably been a huge heart attack a few years later. So life was kind to me. Life was brutally kind to me. It gave me type 1 diabetes, which there is no cure. I have to manage it really, really carefully. 20 years on, touch wood, it's going well. But life could have chosen not to warn me and could have just pushed me over, drop dead on the spot, heart attack 10 years later. So, that was the wake-up call.
Yeah, it's one of those be careful what you wish for side hustle stories. Hey, I've got a full-time job. I built a side hustle that blows up. And it's actually, I don't know if you've read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Yes, I have. I
mean, very similar kind of thing, right? 8 years as an accountant, side hustle for 8 years until he was able to pay himself a salary, and then flipped over to Nike full-time after 8 years. And I think that this is one of the poignant points that is worth both you and I highlighting to anyone who's listening and thinking of starting a side hustle. It is hard work. All these people on Instagram and Facebook shilling you the lifestyle of Lamborghinis and mansions, it's bullshit. The truth is, if you're building it for the right reason, it's hard. And it's supposed to be hard because if it was easy, everyone would do it, and then it wouldn't be hard anymore.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that Shoe Dog book, there's a short passage, I'm going to corrupt it, but he says something along the lines of, getting from there to here is incredibly hard. The weak died along the way, and the weak-hearted never set out.
Amazing.
Something like so. It's going to be hard. There is no easy way from there to here, and if your heart and intention isn't firmly in it, don't set out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so then you now have made the decision after you've become a type 1 diabetic to leave. You've been shoved a little bit to leave the professorship and focus on Canon full time. What was the point at which you then broke and realized you needed to hire someone to help you?
So Nick, I didn't leave the professorship. What I did was I worked out how to get the two to work alongside each other. And that it was, if you are going to try and do 120 of this and 120 of that, you're going to land up doing 10 of each. So it was working out how the two could coexist. And, so out of that, I converted my university professorship into a business school professorship, which is a far more obvious, business associate. I moved from, or colleague, I moved from being a campus or a resident-based professor into the Gibbs Business School environment, which is a very different teaching format. And the people that you're teaching are also executives, early or mid-career. So it's an entirely different environment. It's a far happier colleague, a collaborator, bedfellow. So I worked out how to get the two to go alongside each other. And I think to work alongside each other really well, that they reinforce and feed each other in a very, very rich way. That doesn't make everything easy. It still means there's a lot of juggling going on sometimes. The weekend before last, I had to teach all of that weekend. 2 weekends coming, I'm teaching on the Saturday. That's demanding. That takes from rest. It takes from family. It takes from self. But if you can work out how to put these things together, then they can reinforce each other. in a powerful way, that it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can actually be both.
Yeah, I love that. I'm quite a big proponent of the idea of integration versus balance. And I think you said it well. If
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
120% of everything, you do 10% of anything. And that for me is about balance. Is something's got to give if you're balancing. But if you're integrating, you're choosing how to figure out for them both to work in your life, not that one is preferable to the other.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it is such that, that it is impossible for you to do your job properly, then it's no longer a side hustle. It's no longer a sweet distraction. It's a compromise. And if you're compromising your work, your career, your clients, then it's a problem. Then it's not something that is not an avenue you can go down.
Yeah,
Then you've
that
abandoned the authenticity.
agreed. And that brings me to the idea, something I'm trying to impart on people is the concept of defining what success means to you in your life, as well as defining what failure means in your life. It's something I'm interested for someone like you with an established business. Do you still have very clear ideas of what success will look like for you in this business and what failure looks like?
So, for me, success is that clients leave us in better shape than they found us, or that through their relationship with us, we take them into a better place. And I can give you, miracle stories. Some of my, greatest client successes have transformed people's investment lives, financial lives. To me, that's success. It's not about how many clients do I have, what's my business bottom line. If I'm good in looking after people's financial well-being, helping them get to healthier, stable, more robust financial places, then the business will be successful. Clients will come, assets will grow, it'll translate into business revenue and bottom line. So for me, success is about, well, I'll tell you what failure is. Failure is when a client leaves us and says, that was a really bad experience. I didn't get what I came here for.
And you've had those?
That's failure. I wish I didn't, Nick, but of course I do. And anyone who says that they don't have those bad investment results or bad client results, I would call them out. So yes, there are places where either, through our actions, our decisions, we get a client into a place that they didn't anticipate being. Maybe we build for them a mandate that is wrong for them. Not through, I always want to be, clear. None of this is like negligence or neglect. It's, something has gone wrong along the way. It might be a change in their circumstance. I came to you, here's what I had. Things have changed. I'm leaving. I can't afford this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Or the risk is too big, or the risk isn't big enough. So it's hard to. Well, I don't think there is such a thing as a typical mistake or a typical bad outcome. Each one has its own consequence. All the way through to my father-in-law who fired me once.
Hey, I fired my mom, so I'll call it even.
He fired me because I put him into a portfolio. He said, it's just too risky. I can't do this. Not having a good time. I'm out of here. And when he took the decision to exit, the portfolio was in negative return territory. I got fired for, bad returns for my father-in-law. I was like, that makes for an interesting
Sunday lunch
weekend meal. So yes, there are those cases. If they were the majority, we wouldn't be in business. They're a very small minority, and what I'm proud of is that amazingly, of those guys, and it was 12 guys, actually it wasn't 12 guys, it was 10, 11 that came on our first meeting, plus myself, made for 12. Of those, 8 are still clients.
Wow.
25 years later, 8 of those 12 are still with me.
That's amazing.
I count as one, so maybe that doesn't really count. So 7 of the 11 are still my clients. And I'm really proud of that. That to me says, that's success. That if someone says, what's your experience been like with Canon Asset Managers? Of course, some people are going to say, wasn't great, bad, portfolio didn't land up where I imagined. That exists. But that I can talk to these people who are still with me 25 years on, that's success.
Yeah.
And then there's there is the big sort of headline stories where early 2000s, a client came to me. He had sold his business into a large listed company and had sold in exchange for shares, and had done this at the time of the technology boom. And so in exchange, he had received a few million shares for the business that he had sold to this tech co. And at its peak, the few million shares was valued at 300 million. This is the early 2000s. When the tech bubble burst, late 90s, when the tech bubble burst, early 2000s, that 300 million was worth 3 million. It'll tell you what the share price did.
Oof.
And so he had gone from a circumstance, never need to work again, 300 million, to 3 million. And in that time, his personal circumstances had changed. They'd had a family tragedy that had put massive medical pressure on their family. His life had changed 180 degrees in the space of months. And we took on that portfolio of a few million shares and shepherded it, nurtured it back to a position that he was financially independent, that he was back on his feet.
Wow.
I'm really proud of those types of things. That, to me, that's success.
Yeah, amazing. So a couple of shorter quickfire questions. You can feel free to answer them as widely or deeply as possible. When you start something new, do you think it's more important to focus on the detail or the big picture?
Is it relevant?
Help me out.
How relevant is this?
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And I think that's big picture, because I can solve for you something. I'm ultra picky, 4th decimal place burger. I can build for you the most gorgeous detailed balance sheet that describes nothing. So big picture.
Cool. Good.
It has what I built. Does it matter? Is it relevant?
Yeah, I love that. I think you're right. The question of relevance is super important to your life and the bigger context too. Like, is this, for me, for example, starting a side hustle that isn't something I want to do for the next 2 or 3 years is a problem, because if you start something new, it's going to be with you for a while. So I think relevance is a good one. Then this one is slightly more interesting to me. What one thing that's happened to you that you wouldn't want to repeat, but that you're grateful for happening?
Sure. Personal or business, or
either or. I mean, your diabetes kind of covers it. If you want to get an easy escape out of that one.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a hard question, which is why I'm asking you a question back.
So I'll give you mine.
Technique number one.
I'll give you mine, right? And Becky, my editor, just if you're listening, when you get this, you can edit mine out, because my listeners have heard this a few times. But mine is really simple. Selling MoTribe nearly 10 years ago, it was done against my will. My co-founder stabbed me in the back and sold the business from behind my back. And that was horrific, but actually correct. Sure. He did it in the wrong way, but he did it for the right reasons. So I'm glad it happened, because it got me out of a bad business, a bad relationship, and a bad investor partnership. But I wouldn't want to repeat it because it was horrific.
Yeah, look, I could give you many examples, and probably the most obvious is one of partnership, where you bring someone into a very precious place, a sacred place, that is your creating, your crafting, and they can stamp all over it and do really bad things.
Yeah.
The mistake that I made, choosing the wrong partner, it's a big lesson. So I would not want to do it again, but I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah, partners are a hell of a thing, hey? Jeez. Okay, so the last and most advice-giving question is, what do you wish someone told you when you were just starting out?
Go early, go quick. You've got far more optionality than you imagine. And, when I look back to 20 years ago, I'm annoyed with myself that I didn't start 5 years before. I'm annoyed with myself that I didn't ramp it quicker. I can't go back and ramp it quicker now, but you can get the exponential going quicker. And I'm annoyed with myself that there were some really good fits or opportunities that at the time, you think I'll come back to this. I'll circle back, and when you circle back, it's gone. And then that does start to sort of close down your optionality. So what I had 25 years ago was a wide open plane, filled with opportunity. So the plane that sits in front of you is much, much wider than you ever imagined. And I'll say that to my 51-year-old self also, is there is nothing at 51 about 51 that is end of career. I'm looking for stuff. I'm going to do stuff. So that it's a different plane. It's a different sort of savannah to run on, but it's wide open. And the advice or guidance last guidance that I would give to myself is, for heaven's sakes, don't do a business plan.
Yes, that is advice I give too. Absolutely. Why?
They don't work. I mean, look, a business plan helps you put down where you might be strong, what resources you might have. So, okay, let me not be too flippant. There is merit, in having sort of a pantry or a larder. You know where you are, what your resources are. But if you want good humor, go and look at a business plan from as recently as 18 months ago, or even 6 months ago. And go and look at this year's business plan. Start of this year's business plan. How's that going? So the plan is not planned. The plan is agility, iteration, optionality, figuring how you work with the shitstorm that's dealt to you on a Tuesday morning.
100%. Adrian, this was riveting. Thank you so much for your time. What I like to do is give my guests a couple of minutes to tell my listeners where they can find you, where they can give you money, or any other links or things you want to promote at the end of the show. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be with you, and for people who've listened, absolute pleasure and privilege to share my story. You can find me on LinkedIn, just my name, Adrian Saville. You can find me on Twitter, just my name, Adrian Saville. And you can find me through the business school, www.gibbs.coza, or you can find me through the company.canonassets.coza.
Amazing. Adrian, again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good week ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you.